outside of his body. While on the WTA style forehand, after the unit turn, when the racket is about to blend into the forward swing phase of the stroke, that the racket appears behind the body. We see the same variation with Roger and Serena. Well, I'm going to stop the film right when the racket is dropping into the blending of the stroke, right when the racket is about to go forward. We can see that Roger's racket is staying outside of his body. The racket is behind him, but outside of the body. While Serena, right when the racket is dropping into the forward swing phase of the stroke, that the racket went beyond her and behind her back. This rear angle is really going to illustrate how the ATP style forehand remains on the outside of the body, demonstrated here by Andy Murray. And while Venus is about to blend the backswing phase into the forward swing phase of the stroke, that the racket has gone beyond her back. The reason why I chose Rafa and Wozniacki together is because both of those players have really long loopy swings. Rafa out of the top four definitely has the longer stroke of the top four, and Kyle Wozniacki always been accused of having long loopy strokes. So to make more sense of this video, I'm going to take Rafa and flip him as a right-handed player so we can have a little fun right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to superimpose both players. Now, what I'm going to do is, after I line them up, I'm going to show you this is Wozniacki, and I'm going to stop the racket right when it starts to drop into the forward swing phase of the swing. And Rafa, I'm going to do the same thing right when the racket is dropping in the forward swing phase of the swing. And now you can see right now the length between the two backswing, how much further back beyond her body Wozniacki's racket went, and where Rafa's racket stayed on the inside of his body. The second variation is the role of the non-hitting hand immediately after the unit turn. During the unit turn, both forehand style, you can see the non-hitting hand is on the throw of the racket. Now, immediately after the ATP style forehand, when they release the non-hitting hand and begin the backswing phase, you're going to see how the non-hitting hand is going to remain across the body and almost parallel to the baseline. Where immediately after releasing the racket, you're going to see on the WTA style forehand how the left hand is going to be pointing directly at the ball and almost being perpendicular to the baseline. Now you're going to see how every single WTA style player is going to make the exact same move with the non-hitting hand. You're going to see here how Serena, her left hand is pointing directly at the ball, so perpendicular to the baseline. You're going to see how Venus is going to make the exact same move, letting go, and the left hand comes forward. And you're going to see how Caroline Wozniacki will do an exact same thing. Now, the women are going to do this basically for one reason and one reason only. One, they let go of the left hand a little sooner than the guys because the stroke is going to be longer. And when the left hand, the racket gets way beyond them with that big backswing, they need to stay balanced. And that left hand will really counteract as more as a staying balanced throughout the backswing phase of the stroke, because you'll see on the ATP style forehand and WTA style forehand, when they come around, they will come around pretty much in the exact same spot. But since the backswing is so big, that non-hitting hand needs to get out in front for the players to keep their balance. Now you're going to see here how Novak and Roger Federer non-hitting hand will remain across and their body parallel to the baseline. You'll see how Andy Murray will make the exact same move. Now, the reason why the guys can keep the non-hitting hand there is because their stroke is a lot shorter, and that is really going to play into the high power slot I will be talking about later. They can stay coiled a little longer, so they can really violently come around and open up their body. So that really has to do with the length of the backswing. Really is going to affect what the non-hitting hand does on the WTA side versus the shorter backswing on the ATP side will allow the non-hitting hand to stay across the body longer. The next variation is the position of the elbow during the backswing phase of the stroke immediately after the unit turn. It is really where the elbow is positioned and the proximity of the elbow to the body. You're going to see on the ATP style forehand that the elbow is much higher than the WTA style forehand. And the second difference is how much further away the arm is set on the ATP style and how much closer to the body the hitting elbow remains close to the body. Now, the main reason why the guys keep the elbow up and away from the body is because the ATP player is setting up for a much direct swing path to the ball, a much quicker swing, setting up a swing really with the arm swinging more independently from the body. Since he's going to keep the racket outside the body, the elbow needs to stay up and away from the body. But the women, by bringing the racket beyond themselves, behind the body, that's pretty much why the elbow is setting up right there. So that's really setting up that long, loopier backswing that I was talking about. And then really forcing the women now to start to uncoil into making contact versus the guys are really going to swing more the arm. The beginning of the swing will be more with the arm swinging independently from the body versus uncoiling into the shot. This very subtle variation has a huge impact on the type of swing each player will use. The initial position of the elbow will not only influence but define the type of stroke each side will use. You can see here Nole, by keeping the elbow up and away from his body, will allow a much quicker motion forward swing to the ball. Where on a WTA style, by keeping the elbow down and close to the body, is really calling for a much longer backswing, taking the racket beyond the shoulders. So that very subtle variation at the beginning of the stroke really affects the entire swing. This next variation really sets the two strokes apart. It is a position of the hand in relationship to the racket during the backswing phase of the stroke. What I mean by that is I want you to focus on where the head of the racket is in relationship to the hand throughout the backswing phase of the stroke. The head of the racket will stay outside the hand throughout the entire backswing phase of the stroke. Now, we already know that the arm is going to stay outside the body, but now not only the arm but the head of the racket is going to stay outside the hand and the arm as well. Where you can see on the WTA style forehand that right away as the backswing phase begins to blend to the forward swing phase, that the head of the racket is going to get beyond the hand right away. And it is this racket and hand position that will have a huge effect on the upcoming move, which is called the high power slot. You can see how right away the head of the racket is beyond not only the body, but is also beyond the hand. Once again, I flipped Rafa right-handed, then we can see and compare the two strokes a little easier. Now, once again, you're going to see how Rafa's racket head really remains outside of his hand, and in the WTA style forehand, right away the racket head goes beyond the hand. This will have a dramatic effect and is the main reason why the guys will be able to create much more racket head speed and much more topspin eye contact versus a WTA style forehand. Both ATP and WTA players are going to get into the slot. And what is a slot? Well, it's when the butt cap of the racket is pointing at the ball, the wrist is laid back while the racket is pointing back towards the back fence. So you can see here that both Roger and Serena got into the slot. But the biggest variation is how they got into the slot. And that is really going to be a huge difference into the two shots. Now you're going to see now Roger, what I've just been talking about in the first three variations, where when the swing is much shorter, the racket stays outside the hand, the hand stays outside the body, and right when the racket is about to go forward, at this last second, you're going to see how the ATP style forehand, the wrist lays back and it flips back and gets into the slot. So how long it's going to hold, and this is what's going to cause the high-powered slot. And you're going to see the WTA style forehand that the racket almost gets in the slot very, very early. So now the racket is going to come around more because of an uncoiling motion. So it's going to be more the arm, really the body bringing the arm around to contact versus The ATP style forehand is going to be more, as I talked about earlier, where the arm is going to swing much more independently from the body because of this quick wrist action right there. How the ATP style forehand really they lay the wrist back, they kind of flip it back and really hang on to the last possible second to flip it around. And this is the key of how the ATP players will get a lot more racket head speed than the WTA players. We're going to see the exact same variation using Nole and Maria. We can see how when Nole is completing the backswing phase of the stroke, that the racket head has remained not only outside the body but also outside the hand. And while Maria has separated the hands, and when the backswing phase is just starting to blend into the forward swing phase, that the racket head is not only beyond the body but also beyond the hand. So when they're both going to get into the slot, you're going to see that Nole is going to get to the slot in a much more violent way. It's going to be a lot quicker to the ball, shorter motion, but much quicker to the ball, which will result into much more racket head speed than Maria. Where you can see here Maria is kind of laboring through bringing the body around, where Nole is more of a release and once again swinging the arm a little bit more independently from the body up onto making contact. I am now going to focus on two variations that are a direct result of the preparation phases. How both styles of backswing phases are going to affect the amount of head speed and topspin the players will be able to generate. One will be the hand position between the slot and contact, and two will be the roll of the wrist at contact. So let's look at one first, the hand position between the slot and contact. Now you're going to see right now that the face of the racket, that Novak, the face is much more closed. The strings are pointing at the ground, where here the racket is almost perpendicular to the court. Now this can have a big effect. The reason why the men will be able to really come up on the ball and generate a lot more topspin. Now you're going to see now at contact, the racket is going to be parallel to the net, and so will Venus's shot. But now watch the second variation, the roll the wrist at contact. Watch how the guys, watch the hand of Novak, and the hand is going to roll on top more. The wrist is going to release and come on top, where here you can see almost you can draw a straight line between his forearm and his racket. So the wrist released a little bit, where most ATP WTA women like Venus, after contact the wrist is still laid back, and until then the wrist releases. So the guys are much more vertical here at contact, and this is where they can hit that heavier ball. What is a heavier ball? Is a combination of racket head speed and spin. They're going to brush and roll the ball at contact, versus a lot of WTA women will still be going through, kind of plowing through with the wrist laid back, and that is the main reason why the guys will hit a heavier ball than the women. Let's now look at Roger and Vika, and I stopped at pretty much the exact same spot where the racket is about to blend into the forward swing. They're both into the slot. Now you can see how Vika's racket, the head of the racket is almost perpendicular to the ground, versus Roger's racket face is parallel to the ground. And there's a good reason that Vika can't get the racket flat like Roger can, because it's very impossible to, when the racket goes so far beyond the body, to actually close the face of the racket. So it's a more natural way to keep the racket that way, and for Roger to keep it closed the way it is once the racket is kept on the outside of the body. So there's a direct correlation. Why the racket ends up in this spot is pretty much because they have two different types of backswings. Now let's focus now on again at the point of contact, and I want to show you. Roger has probably one of the heaviest balls on tour, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to stop it right at contact for Roger. It's going to be tough. This is taped in HD, so you can see here that the wrist is laid back. Focus on Roger right now, and immediately after contact, you're going to see the face of the racket, how the face of the racket is closed. Okay, the racket face, the wrist has released. The wrist has come on top of the racket has come on top of the ball, and we're going to see that, when Vika is hitting the ball, there is contact. I'm going to advance it frame by frame. You're going to see that the WTA wrist is still locked. and it will not release until later into the swing. So you can see how the VK is kind of pushing through, and then it releases, where immediately after contact, when I'm going to advance it a couple of frames with Roger, you're going to see how, just like with Novak, how the racket head and the arm are almost into, you can almost kind of draw a straight line between the